We got another first timer here. Josh Wisniewski comes down from up there in Sitka Town, I think. He's pokes around at long lining and jigging and little set netting and so forth. A man of many talents here for his first time. He's also looking for some IFQ donations if you have any to give him. So Josh, you out there? Come on up. Thanks for coming.
Is that okay?
You're beautiful!
Thanks, brother.
But I want to be pretty. It's pretty down here. He's pretty. He's pretty.
Awesome. Here's a couple for trollers. Lines in the water, looking out the wheelhouse door. Those lines in the water, hand trolling outside the kelp beds on a cold winter day, and loons fishing too. Cruise off, Inner Point, Shoal Point, Vitscari Rock, St. Lazaria, and out to Cape. Fishing alone, watching and adjusting and waiting. Winter winds and stinging spray and watery eyes, and moving close to the heater to warm my hands and listening to hear the clacker go off. Running through the gear in my mind and pulling fish over the rail, and they're always kings. But hours pass and change spoons and adjust leader lengths and rebait again. Drinking tea, and I watch to see what the other boats are doing or what the VHF says, and it's not much. Watching the gear and gulls circle above, and even with no fish, there's no place I'd rather be, and I steal from Byron because I love not man the less, but the ocean more. And wind whips through the rigging and swells roll under me and tears stream down my face, and I wonder how Loon did today. Sure. So we can see it. Here's one about spring corridor openings. From Sealing Cove and Middle Channel, round Makanati Island, East Channel and Halibut Point, Old Sitka Rocks and Middle Island. Trollers pass and wave, poles down and running through the gear, hand pulling lines, shaking rockfish and letting them slip back through the finger, because somewhere kings are feeding, but not here. This one's about herring in Sitka Sound. Yah, you who feed everyone, from sea lions and whales to eagles and raven to lingcod and king salmon, and you fill the shoals with your abundance. And Harvey told me every one of these places used to have their own population. Aleutkeena, Deep Inlet, Silver Bay, and all the others. My dad and them used to hand troll there too, even before motors. They'd get towed out in those days, but no one even thinks to fish any of those drags now. And on the outer coast, they used to see spawn from below Dorothy Narrows all the way past Cape Georgiana, and Hecata Strait, Sea Otter Sound, midden sites with 9,000-year-old herring bones. And that's not the oldest. Triquet Island, Heiltsuk village site, 16,000 years old, because before streams stabilized and salmon were plentiful, they ate herring. They still do. Local knowledge, Tlingit, Myths and Texts, Swanton, 1909, records Kiksutty oral traditions, the Herring Maiden and Herring Rock, right in front of the old village too, calling them in. But remember to share, because even she who knew better got greedy and harvested all day and night and wouldn't share with the in-laws. Who transformed into an owl, she flew up Indian River, Owl Mountain, that's from herring. But the herring spawn this year on the branches was too thin to harvest, and the spawn too short. 2 weeks reduced to 6 hours, and fish spread out, chased by purse seiners, 49 permit holders, mostly from out of town too. But they say it never used to be like that. Towards all things show respect, inviting herring to shore and branches left undisturbed until the spawn. And now everyone runs around all over the place, me too. And elders' warnings to state fishery managers go unheeded. Even in 1997, elders told them about false spawns. But I seen the days when herring was chased by sea lions and other predators, and herring would crowd to the beaches and be feed to eagles and ravens that don't want to get their feet wet. Now there's nature. Kicksutty women, the herring ladies, waiting for a harvest that doesn't happen, empty freezers. So industry versus community needs, but the price is less than $300 a ton and they ain't even making any money. And even the city wants it shut down because the guideline harvest level, GHL, set at 11,000 tons and people harvested less than 3,000 before the fishery managers had an emergency closure. They're fishing the pockets now because John says they do that when there's no fish, and even our subsistence sets come up short. Middle Island, the cookie jar filled with empty hemlock branches. And the same thing happened to Caw Shakes and Cat Island, then it all fell apart. But we forget all that because Sitka Sound is different, they say. Historic abundances, and some were fished out in just 1 or 2 seasons. Lynn Canal and Auk Bay in 1980, and West Bayham Canal, 2 after only 1 fishery. Caw Shakes collapsed in 90, and by 95, the biomass dropped from 20,000 tons to 143. And the industry, trust us, the science is good, and the models predict there's plenty of fish. This isn't like those other fisheries. Sitka's different. It's the last one. But Mark Jacobs told him 20 years ago, the present so-called experts and biologists coming to us with biomass and saying the herring is out there, they can tell you a lot, but they're no experts. And even Teneke and Lisiansky don't see spawn on kelp anymore. And Washington and southern BC before all this. Right in the Gulf of Alaska, you know, after you cross into that long gulf going up toward Cape Mudge, they used to catch tons and tons of herring up in there, and they fished them so hard they just spoiled their own salmon fishing. But our area fishery managers blame the early closure on the standard. It's too high and they don't want the fish. And on deck, stacking seine for the trip home. Fuck man, the fish were there, but they wouldn't let us fish on them. And us trollers, we wonder where the big kings have gone. But back in the day, we complained about dropping king abundance in Chatham Straits because of the lack of feed and overharvesting and crashes. And that's in the herring reduction plant days. But now everyone's silent during the management meetings. It's just a subsistence issue. And we all stick to our United Fishermen of Alaska and Alaska Troller Association pre-approved talking points and have breakfast at the Backdoor Cafe during October mornings and talk about local declines and forage fish abundance instead of fishing on the line for kings. But no one's catching anyway, so maybe next month. And me, I love herring fishing too, because in 1997, one of the first times they let us fish in Prince William Sound after the spill, and we made a 60-ton set in under 15 minutes. Next day, mid-air collision between 2 spotter planes, but no boats were hit, and the pilot and spotter were both dead. Hanging over the side of the boat with a big Hawaiian deckhand holding my legs while I cut the pilot out of his seatbelt and watching his bones move through a hole in his leg while we helped get him out of the cockpit. Later on deck, "Is that yours or his, son?" Grant asks. That's the blood on my face. They didn't let us fish that day either, but last spring, in a little bite just past the Gavinskis, somehow I luck out and I find a small patch, herring eggs on kelp, and just enough to share and eat through the spring though. Herring, Gunashish, we all depend on you. Seal people, salmon people, whale people, and even us humans too, though sometimes it seems like we're the real problem, but it wasn't always that way.
It's all a red herring!
Yeah, here's one for set netters on a Sunday for Robert. So what do you think about Jesus Christ? The fuck over? I said, what do you think about Jesus Christ? The hell? I ain't thinking about Jesus Christ. I'm mending net and rocking out to the dead. Later, when I was a kid, you guys gave me your houseboat to live on for the winter, and you told me I should wait before I buy any halibut quota. The price will drop. That was a mistake. And then the next year before going tendering, I helped Dave build your skiff, Bianca. And I tendered your salmon for 2 seasons, open load nets in your skiff at low tide. I'll stack leads. And years later, they found you floating face down and your skiff turned off on a run you'd made 1,000 times. It doesn't make sense. And passing the bottle in Dave's shack to Robert, and then that night paddling home around the point, and Iliamna's all lit up. I hatched this poem thinking of you and bucking the current. This is a poem about conservation. A lobbyist for the herring industry told me that all fishermen were conservationists by nature, or else we wouldn't have any fisheries. And then that winter, he lobbied against the knowledge of elders who said our local herring fishery would fail if it opened because the fish were too small. And later, the fishing game shut the fishery down early with half the quota harvested, saying the fish were too small. Conservation? But king salmon, we've got troll limits, and when the second king opener closed after 5 days, and the fleet fished for hatchery chums, crawfish, deep inlet, Sitka Sound, but I can't make chum fishing work on my little boat, capacity. Instead, I went to work and stared at my computer screen, waiting for coho to come around the corner so I could fish the Sound. But every year, Cape gets closed, all on the west side of Cruise Off and all the way to Shoal Point, because the area is a high king abundance. But not for sporties, though. That's the politics of allocation, because all spring trollers are tied up at the dock or fish the corridors, while tourists flew home to Washington, Arizona, and Colorado with boxes of fish. Hard not to feel the sting of it, conservation. Last winter, halibut meetings, quota reductions, conservation. And I'm all for conservation too, but shit, man, I paid for each pound of quota share I own, and we're already taking a hit on kings. I want to do my part, and I get it too, because that could be me, or maybe it is. Over $70 a pound for quota shares in 2C now, and I find myself priced out of the fishery I built my little boat for. And I hear the strain in his voice, because he's my age, bigger boat, more invested, grew up in the life, didn't build it from scratch. But he's got kids, boat payments, fuel, insurance, maintenance, closed areas, and reduced fishing time, overcapitalized, and hard not to feel it all, that tightening in the gut, because he don't want to do anything different. And I can't say I blame him, because I don't either, because I want to bait, set, haul, repeat, pace and setting, the flow in the moment, being in it, all, the real, setting gear in pre-dawn morning light and walking down the cork line when fish hit the net during a midnight sunset, and spoons and flashers coiled on the back deck, and long line gear and anchors, buoys tied to the port bulwarks, making deliveries, slush ice dripping from brailer bags and tail slings. It all makes sense out on the ground, but it's that town life that makes it hard. These layers we add on and the expectations we have of the sea to provide for boat payments, permits, quota shares, mortgages, kids, colleges, and maybe even try to save a little for later too, for conservation. We've all got our reasons for wanting this life, and I have mine. And how much can the ocean give, and how much can we ask, and for how many and for how long? Is it enough for the home pack, the smokehouse, and the freezer, or enough for our local markets and domestic markets, or maybe to feed China and to feed the world, or enough to cover fuel, gear, and bait, or enough to sneak through the winter, mostly conservation? There's no easy answers, just hard questions and a churning gut and restless dreams.
This one does another turnover!
Just here's about long lining. The gear's soaking now, and I'm tied to a kelp bed waiting for the tide change, and on the outside of this little bite, waves are crashing. Sitting in the wheelhouse and contemplating a seal swimming by, my meditation broken, because even out here the iPhone beeps and vibrates and begs for attention. Work. Somewhere and for someone the sky is falling. But Tao Qian and Han Shan and even old Royokan over in Japan too, they all said, fuck it. Move to the mountain or to the old farm or to a hut close enough to hear the temple bell ring, and scratched it out somehow, etching poems on rocks or calligraphy on kites, subsisting. Motoring out to start hauling gear now and hand pulling. There's lots of lingcod on this set, and I was wondering why no one sets here too. But just this is enough. And so tonight I'll follow their leads, and I'll just sleep by the creek and purify my ears.